Hi, I'm Marcus, owner of Big Island Watch, and I wear two watches. You see, I wasn't kidding. Today, I'm wearing a full metal Casio G-Shock Square on one wrist. That's this. This goes for about $500. On the other wrist, this one here, I'm wearing the new full metal Skmei, which goes for about $15. My good buddy Otto is going to compare these two watches. Stay tuned. Thank you, Marcus. I got this Skmei model number 1456 on AliExpress for $14.40. I got this G-Shock here at Reed's Jewelers. It's a full metal G-Shock. The model number is GMW B5000D1A. Someone on eBay is selling this watch for $435. Personally, I like to buy a watch like this for more of a known quantity. Ideally, I like to buy a G-Shock from an authorized G-Shock dealer. While the Skmei and G-Shock full metals look as well as feel very similar on the wrist, functionally the two watches are technologically in different leagues. The G-Shock is solar powered. This Skmei is powered by a 2025 lithium battery. The G-Shock automatically sets itself to the correct time via Bluetooth, and the Skmei you have to manually set the time. One thing I really like about the G-Shock is that I don't have to worry about switching to and from daylight savings time. It automatically does this for me. The G-Shock was made to withstand high velocity impact. The Skmei was not, though it does seem very sturdy for such a cheap watch. I was expecting the Skmei to be made at least partially out of plastic. I was pleasantly surprised to find out that it was completely made out of metal. The G-Shock can withstand as much water pressure as a dive watch, and you could swim and bathe worry-free with the G-Shock. The Skmei has a water resistance rating of 3 ATM, which is not that great. The only watery activity that I would do with the Skmei is wash my hands. The display of the Skmei has much better contrast than the G-Shock, but the G-Shock's display is much better because it can be seen much more clearly at angles. The G-Shock also has a large readability advantage in situations where there is bright light. The Skmei offers the same basic digital watch interface features that the G-Shock does, such as a stopwatch, an alarm, and a lighted display. But the Skmei's interface is antiquated, even by cheap digital watch standards. The Skmei doesn't display the time when not in time mode. For example, you can set the stopwatch on the G-Shock and it will still display the time. As you can see, the time is 12:47. And when I put the Skmei in stopwatch mode, as you can see, it does not display the time. It just displays the stopwatch. This is the second Skmei that I've reviewed with an 80s style digital interface. I think that Skmei really needs to step up its game in this area. One useful feature that the Skmei offers that the G-Shock lacks is a dual time feature. Now I'll show you. I'm going to put this into dual time mode, and as you can see, it's just showing me one time. By definition, dual time should give one the ability to see two separate times at once. The Skmei's buttons are not as recessed as the G-Shock's buttons, and they're much easier to press. Wearing the Skmei, I haven't run into the problem that I often run into when wearing some other digital watches where I press the buttons unintentionally. From a meter or two away, it's hard to tell the G-Shock and the Skmei apart, but there are some distinct physical differences. The bezel on the G-Shock is brushed. The bezel on the Skmei is polished. The G-Shock's display is more recessed than the Skmei's. The Skmei's crystal appears to be plastic. The G-Shock's crystal is mineral. I think that for $15, Skmei is using an acceptable material for its crystal. However, I think that for $500, one should expect the G-Shock to have a sapphire crystal. Both of these watches wear very nicely for relatively bulky watches. While the G-Shock has a much nicer and more comfortable bracelet, the Skmei is actually more comfortable to wear, and that's because the case conforms to the wrist better. Both bracelets start at 25 millimeters in width, but the G-Shock tapers down considerably to 17.5 millimeters in width. The Skmei tapers down to only 22 millimeters. The significantly better taper on the G-Shock makes the bracelet more comfortable. Also, the steeper taper of the G-Shock looks a lot classier. The small amount of polishing on the mid-links of the G-Shock that the Skmei lacks makes the G-Shock look a lot classier as well. The G-Shock and the Skmei's bracelet are both 4 millimeters in thickness, which is pretty standard. The G-Shock's links are shorter, so the G-Shock has more links. Now, this helps to make the bracelet of the G-Shock more flexible, and I'll do a comparison. This is the G-Shock bracelet, and it's pretty flexible. And this is the Skmei, I'll do this side because it has more links, Skmei bracelet, and as you can see, it is not nearly as flexible. Now, the flexibility of the G-Shock bracelet is going to allow it to conform to your wrist better. The G-Shock uses spring bars to connect its links. I have a video on how to do this, and I'll leave that in the description. The Skmei uses more traditional push pins to connect its links. The Skmei was very easy to size. You shouldn't have any trouble at all. The G-Shock clasp is made out of better materials than the Skmei clasp. However, the gap here on the G-Shock, I'll show you what I'm talking about, is way bigger than it needs to be. In fact, there's no reason to have any gap whatsoever. I think that Casio gets away with this kind of nonsense because, you know, they can. Well, the Skmei clasp is made cheaply out of pressed metal. It is very well designed, actually, and it appears to be very sturdy. Skmei clasp is vastly better than the clasp of the $80 Invicta that I reviewed earlier. I think that both watches have a very nice weight to them. It's a real Goldilocks weight, and I'm going to weigh both watches now. Now, on the Skmei, I have removed 3 links. Okay, so that's 140 grams. I think that that is unbelievable for a watch that costs $15. This has a very nice heft to it. And now for the G-Shock, I have removed, I think, 4 links. So it's 158 grams. I think this is a perfect weight. It's not too light and it's not too heavy. I'll turn off the lights and show you the differences between the lights of both watches. Note that I have the G-Shock set to display its light for 2 seconds, which is the default. Some of the other YouTube reviewers have been complaining about the Full Metal G-Shock not displaying its light long enough. You know, they have it set to the default of 2 seconds, and that's because they didn't bother to read the manual. You can manually set the light to display for 4 seconds. It's not a big deal. I'm going to turn on the Skmei light now. I think that's pretty respectable. And now I'm going to turn on the G-Shock light. I think that's super awesome. Okay, I did not forget to give you the obligatory watch on the wrist shot. I have 6 3/4 inch wrists, which are smallish, and the watch feels totally great. I think it looks totally great. It was only hair pulley for about the first few hours, and then the links loosened up. I think it's totally fine. Now, I'll put the G-Shock on. Now, as I mentioned, the G-Shock is not, in fact, I'll show you, is not quite as comfortable as the Skmei, almost as comfortable. And the reason why, it's that these things protrude more. I'm not sure what you would call it, but this protrusion here causes the watch to not wear as comfortable as the Skmei. However, the bracelet is much more comfortable than the Skmei. Now, I'll show you. See, it's a pretty big gap here and here, but really, if you wear the watch relatively tight, it doesn't have to be chokingly tight, but just on the tight side, it wears totally comfortably. And again, I have 6 3/4 inch wrists, and I think the watch looks great. I think it feels great. I've worn this all day long for the last 6 months to work. It's not an issue. If you look closely at the finishing of both watches, it becomes obvious that the G-Shock is much more refined, classier, and it's just a prettier watch. However, the Skmei does a damn nice job. It looks and feels much more expensive than a $15 watch. The Skmei comes in a variety of colors that you can choose from. The Skmei, yeah, it borrows a lot from the G-Shock, though it is to some fair degree doing its own thing. I think it is an homage watch rather than an example of blatant intellectual theft like the LTM Tuna clone that I last reviewed. I don't think that people who really want G-Shocks are going to buy the Skmei. I think producing a substantial watch like the Skmei for $15 is a tremendous engineering feat. And I think that the Skmei is a great watch for people who are either on a tight budget or who don't want to pay a lot for a watch. Would I buy the Full Metal G-Shock again? I've been wearing this watch for the last 6 months, and while the watch has a number of small problems, I love the hell out of this watch, and I would absolutely, positively, 100% buy this watch again with extreme prejudice. If you're interested in the Full Metal G-Shock, I would buy it now as it is a limited edition and hard to get. The Skmei also seems to be going up in price. The individual whom I bought the watch from has already raised the price by $2.